What's up, everyone? This is the Nuts and Bolts Podcast, and I'm your host, the one James, here with our amazing, beautiful co-hosts, Airball.
Hey, everyone.
And MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey, guys. Good
Brand
to see
new
you.
in the house for the first time. I'm excited to have her here to talk about this. We're here to give you the nuts and bolts of the standard and pioneer formats each and every week for your listening pleasure. And maybe you learn a thing or two along the way. We'll probably learn something too, because, that's how it goes around here. But first, let me talk to you about the sponsor of this podcast, CoolStuffInc.com. Using code James5, you can save 5% off of anything in the store, sealed products, singles, anything you could ever need in Magic the Gathering or any other card game for that matter. They have it all. Go save yourself some hard-earned money. Go to CoolStuffInc.com. But first, let's start with the upkeep. It's going to be the jargon of the day. We're going to talk about something that's relevant to today's podcast episode, your first competitive REL event. And we have MTG Nerd Girl here special occasions because she's been through the process, been there, done that when it comes to competitive REL tournaments, right?
In a few.
Just a few? Okay.
Yeah, just a couple.
If you had to give me a ballpark of the amount of them.
Oh, competitive REL events. Oh, I don't know. Couple hundred?
Out of the ballpark.
Yeah, I don't know. A couple hundred. Like if you're including like PTQs and stuff like that, definitely a couple hundred plus all the GPs I've been to. Yeah, there's been a lot for sure.
I guess like RPTQs and PPTQs also count as competitive REL events too.
Yep.
I don't know, it might be in the few hundreds. I think you might beat me and Airball combined.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I play mostly limited, so I don't do a ton of like the grinder circuit. I don't do like the Star City events, but I go to basically every limited Grand Prix. I used to go to every standard Grand Prix and every PTQ or anything like that was in, I don't know, like a 3-state radius that was limited for sure.
A lot of driving. 3-state radius. I mean, I guess I live in Florida, which is a pretty big state. But in order for me to get to, Atlanta or a different state, it would be like a 7-hour drive. Or, somewhere it's like hours, with a lot of hours.
I was from San Diego, so I would drive all the way up to San Francisco, which was very far.
Wow. What's the Airball? What's the farthest you've driven to an event?
Ooh. Farthest I've driven to an event? Probably, I don't know, 3 hours.
Oh, that's baby work.
I know. I'm a baby. I'm just a baby.
I don't know. I mean, there's no barometer on like how long you've been in competitive tournaments. There's still like certain things you have to do, right? In order to, we're going to get into that. Certain things you have to do beforehand, during, and after. But we're going to start with the upkeep, which is the attrition jargon today. Attrition is playing for a long game in which you win through incremental advantages and value rather than just playing a high mana value card to win the game. And attrition could mean a big tournament too. A lot of the times when you're in a 12-round tournament, it's kind of like a war of attrition with your brain, with your mindset, sometimes even more than the actual cards you're playing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Especially like Grand Prix, they usually fire like a day late, an hour or two late, and then the rounds take 30 minutes over time. They are 9 rounds for a day, so you end up actively playing or waiting for your round for 10, 11 hours sometimes.
Yeah, that's a long time, especially if there's 2 control decks playing against each other, right? Well, I guess Airball would never know this, but some control decks playing against each other, and it goes into time, and there's 5 turns in time, but, joke's on everybody else. Each turn is like 10 minutes long.
Wait, you're telling me that the round timer is a maximum, not a minimum?
No, it's a minimum.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, okay.
No, it's a maximum. No, there is no maximum. You just see the time go to 0, and you're like, oh, that's fine. We have 5 more turns.
Yeah, that's how it works for me.
I actually made a TikTok. Well, I think it was like yesterday. That was like, why win the game when you can just draw cards?
Yeah.
And yeah,
that, but unironically.
No, yeah, but actually, but that is the jargon of the day today. And not necessarily only in tournaments. When you're playing an attrition game, more of these decks have like a lot of a resource advantage, a lot of bringing back cards from graveyard, maybe a lot of picking your spots with 2-for-1s or 1-for-1 removal. A lot of the games go super long. I guess you're a little bit more qualified. I guess both of you are to talk to us about attrition, because when you're playing in draft and limited, maybe even sealed, I've seen some board states on the other side of the battlefield, and there's a lot of different interactions where you have to kind of make the most out of what cards you have. Like I've seen a lot of like, kicker interactions where you wouldn't even play it where you would normally play it, like a turn 2 card. You would just like wait a lot of turns later to where you can get a lot of value out of like, say, a kicker or whatever other mechanic is on the card. Can you talk, Nerd Girl, a little bit about like attrition in an actual Magic game, like maybe in Limited?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are certainly kicker cards in our current DMU limited format, and a lot of them do some pretty cool stuff. One card that kind of comes to mind is the Phyrexian Missionary. She's a well above rate 2-drop. She's very good even without the kicker, so you can cast her early for a nice onboard early board present advantage. Or you can save her, cast her for 2 extra mana to kick her, and you actually get a creature back from your graveyard back to your hand, which actually is a really powerful ability attached to a creature. So it just kind of depends. I find more often than not, it's worth waiting.
Yeah, I know you're more of a like not a limited player, Airball, more of a constructed player. Can you give me an example of just like an interaction where you would go the attrition route based on, I guess, over playing like a tempo play?
Always. I feel
every time.
Like attrition is always about just grinding out incremental value rather than trying to end the game relatively quickly. I play decks that thrive on that. I don't play the aggro decks that would try to avoid that from happening.
Yeah, I always tell people that the mono red source of card advantage is your opponent still having cards in their hand when you win the game.
Yeah, you kill them and it's like a discard 7.
Exactly. But let's go ahead and get into the main phase. Your first competitive REL tournament. And for those of you that don't know what REL means, it's rules enforcement levels. And there's different levels of this, but just a competitive REL tournament, meaning a RPTQ, regional Pro Tour qualifier, PPTQ, like last chance qualifiers, and even your actual regional championship qualifier or Pro Tour type events are competitive REL tournaments. And we're going to talk about the days before the tournament, the day of the tournament, some gameplay that goes along there in between your rounds and afterwards, so that you can come out of this podcast episode really prepared and know what to do when it comes to being in the tournament experience if it's your first time. There's Magic 30 that's coming up. There is also some MTG Summit coming up, and there's going to be competitive REL tournaments there. So if you're going to those events, then you will hopefully come out of this podcast episode with a really good idea of what to expect. The days before the tournament, you acquire the cards that you think you'll need for the event. And sometimes, in my experience, you might not want to wait until the day of the tournament to get your cards, because a lot of the times, I come from like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive background, and they hike up the cards' prices at the event because they know you need them. So they could definitely be a little bit hard to find last minute, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. They do hike up the prices a little bit sometimes. I don't find that to be the case too much in Magic. I think the biggest concern with waiting to the last minute is a lot of the vendors, because they travel to the event either usually plane, they don't bring a lot of the uncommon staples, a lot of the $1.50 cards they just don't have. So a lot of the sideboard tech that you're going to need is oftentimes going to be really not just expensive, just outright not available.
Yeah, I remember when I was at CFB Vegas trying to put together an Is It constructed deck, and I needed a playset of a Braid. Like, I was going around to limited players begging for a Braids out of their limited decks because no vendors had any copies to give me.
It's actually crazy. I have a Braid literally in front of me, uncommon, right?
They're everywhere except in my deck.
Yeah. I have them right in front of me. They're
just not worth enough for a vendor to bring.
Yeah, like if you put yourself in the vendor shoes, right? Like you're going to bring just like a lot of staple commons and uncommons. You won't be able to bring all the cards with you, you know. And realistically, they're going to make what, 25 cents off the card. Like maybe not worth bringing the little common cards. Like even like a I mean they're going to have like common and uncommon cards like Fatal Push, ones that are very popular and needed for certain events. But a card like a Braid, you're going to have to ask around.
Yeah. One time I was cracking a bunch of packs for an uncommon because I needed it. It was like, I think it was like when Simic Flash was a thing, and there was like it wasn't the 3/2 counter spell, but there was like some idiot lizard that was in the Simic colors. I just needed to crack like half a box to try to find one. It was absurd.
There was a lizard that wasn't the Frilled Mystic? Huh.
No,
You sure it wasn't Phil Mystic?
I'm sure. I think it was actually like a couple of standards before that. It's kind of an older story.
Okay.
I see.
It was before your time. You guys are babies.
I'm not too much of a baby. I started playing.
You talked about Yu-Gi-Oh.
I did talk about Yu-Gi-Oh. Wait, does that inherently make me a baby?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
Not in like the young sense, just in the child sense.
Oh, there's a difference. Okay. No,
I do know you can count to 10,000 though, which is impressive.
I can count to 10,000. And in Magic players only can count to 20, or actually, you know what? I don't even know if Airball can count from 20 to 0, because a lot of the times your opponent just scoops with all of their life still remaining.
Yeah. He doesn't need to count. He just bores them to death.
Yeah,
Life totals are irrelevant.
You count your opponent's brain cells still remaining. So I mean,
it's like milling out their brain.
He mills out their will to live.
Right. No, wait, you can count how many wrinkles are on your brain. That's a different story. Anyways, there's also another aspect of, being in a competitive RAL tournament that can be really detrimental if you are not closely aware of what's going on. There's random deck checks, and you should probably have brand new sleeves, or at least sleeves you've only used for like 1 or 2 tournaments on your cards, or your cards in them, because even like a ding on the side that might be for an important card that you're not even aware of could get you a game loss if you happen to have something wrong with your sleeves, or happen to have a bend or a crease in a certain way on your sleeves that you're not even aware of. Maybe it's small and you get a deck check and you end up getting a whole game loss. Sometimes the judges are nice and they let you switch out the sleeve right away, but sometimes you have to take the game loss, get the new sleeve, and it's just a process that you don't really need to put yourself in. You don't need to put yourself in that situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, good quality sleeves is really, really important. That helps a lot. And if money is also an issue, one of the things I like to do, now this is only relevant for those of you guys who play both limited and constructed, but every time I play a constructed tournament, fresh set of sleeves. And then what I do is I downgrade those sleeves to my draft box. And I always keep, 10 of every land sleeved up, and the excess sleeves go to my drafts and my sealed. And I just keep using that. And I play a lot more sealed than I do constructed. So by the time I play constructed again, I'm ready for a new draft set, sleeve up the new ones, put the old ones onto the next draft set again.
That's a lot of unsleeving to re-sleeve, right?
I mean, if you're sleeving up a new deck every time anyway, why chuck the sleeves away? Use them for some
true.
drafts.
You can go, actually, now that I think about it, limited players can go through, like paper limited players can go through a lot of packs of sleeves if you're not doing that.
Yeah, I keep a little box with me. I get like 100 count, like I said, and I sleeve them all up. And I probably keep a pack of 100 sleeves, because you don't use the same set of 40 every time. It kind of rotates. I'll keep them for like 20 drafts, which is a solid number.
And you can go through 20 drafts without having like, a noticeable mark on a card that you're not aware of.
Yeah, I mean, drafts are a lot like, I wouldn't do this for day 2 of a Grand Prix draft, but drafts at your local card store, yeah, they start to get scuffed. They start to maybe one will rip, but it's a good thing you have 100, and they don't pay that much attention to those. You just kind of shuffle up and whatever. Half the players don't even use sleeves at your local card store for draft anyway.
Yeah, I'm just like super paranoid when I'm in competitive REL events, and I have to get a new pack of sleeves. I don't know if it's just me. Maybe other people think the same way as I do, because I have this thought. Maybe I'm the only one. But I'm just so paranoid of getting a game loss and having a random deck check just lose me a match. So I just always have fresh leaves. But the next thing we have here is that you should probably, if you don't have a lot of experience playing in a competitive event, maybe you're only playing at your local game store, you should get used to manipulating your board and goldfish with yourself. What goldfish means is start playing with your deck by yourself to get used to your card interactions and things like that, because you also don't want to get caught with your opponent thinking that you did something or didn't do something that you did or did not mean to do, and then you can get a judge called on you. Your opponent could think that you might be doing something malicious or cheating. So you just want to be able to be completely used to how your deck's supposed to work before you get to the tournament. I mean, I've had friends, especially when I played back in Yu-Gi-Oh, that would start out in the big tournament playing a deck for the first time. That's scary to me, but they'll do that and they can kind of mess up here and there. You want to be actually 100% used to your deck and know how your own interactions work, and you don't want it to be in that fuzzy thing where opponents are calling judges on you and stuff.
Got it. Play with yourself the day before the event.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was thinking.
Relieves the stress and the tension.
I think it does, yes.
Helps you focus.
Yeah. This is totally serious. Do that. Yeah. Do what they said.
So I think another side note for this topic is not just that it helps you understand your deck and how it works. Another thing that you should be doing, even if you know how your deck works, even if you know it inside and out, a lot of you guys are arena babies, and I know airball. This is definitely something that you struggle with. You could play a deck perfectly on arena, and then when you start to play in paper, you'll sort of fumble around, and it takes a little bit because a lot of players aren't super used to actual physical cards. So needing to tap your mana and making sure that you tap correctly because your mana isn't displayed nice and neatly on your arena screen like it is in your table. The same thing goes for like missing triggers, where you should place things, because arena isn't going to take care of those missed triggers for you. It's not going to ask you like, do you want to do a thing? So putting your stuff next to or near your deck so that way you can see them before you draw your cards can be very important. So getting a feel for the deck, even if you know how to play it, is very important, I think.
Yeah, I didn't know we were calling other people out here, but yeah, I totally agree with you, Nerd Girl. I've seen Airball really fumble.
Well, he's a great Magic player, but he started in Arena. So I've seen him have some trouble with board state management. And I think that's a thing that happens to a lot of newer players.
Yeah, my strategy for dealing with that has just been to make sure there's no board state at all. That's what Supreme Verdict is for.
No, I think I played against you in a competitive tournament. Remember that? And you tapped, you had your lands over your on top of your creatures and stuff. You played Wandering Emperor like under your lands.
He played. I saw he played one of the extra turn spells, and he had it off to the left in what would have been the opposite side graveyard. And I was like, "Is that on the stack? Is that in?" And he's like, "Oh, he played that last turn." And I was like, "What? Why is it over there?
Where is that?"
I'm so confused.
It's just permanent. It's just perpetually on the stack.
You sound like my mom. Like when I was a kid, she's like, "How do you find anything in here?" I'm like, "I know exactly where everything is. It's when you clean it up for me that I don't know where to look."
Wait, am I your mom, or are James and I collectively your mom?
I think it's like the royal mom. Like you're collectively the mom.
That's like the matriarchy. That's what you would call it, right? That's funny. Just don't when you put your lands down, don't put them like upside down. Just want to let you know for next time, Airball.
I think that means the land is in distress or something, right?
No, you just put your opponent's lands upside down so they can't actually use them to cast their spells, or you just counter them. Anyways, next we're going to talk about knowing how you'll get to the venue. The last thing you want is to finally get there and you realize it already started, and then you'll get a round one loss automatically if you get there late. So definitely plan ahead. Know how you're going to get there. Whether you have to go to another city, find out before you even book the hotel or wherever you're staying, Airbnb, staying with your friends, whatever it is, how far it is from the venue, if you're going to have to get a rental car, or if you're doing Uber or your Lyft or whatever to get to the venue, know exactly what time it is, and give yourself like an hour. I always give myself like an hour breathing room, because you just want to get there early enough to where you're not there late. I don't know, do you have any experiences being like late to an event on accident or something?
So I actually made day 2 of a Grand Prix, and then I didn't go to day 2. That happened a couple of times, but mostly on purpose. One time I did it on accident because I was not very far from the venue, and I went to walk in the morning into day 2, and I noticed at night that I was having a little bit of like pain in my foot, and so I started walking, and I couldn't walk the rest of the way. So
Whoa.
And it was for some reason too early, or no active Ubers or something, and I couldn't get a ride. And yeah, I just ended up missing the entire day 2 and limped back to my hotel. It was not pleasant.
Wow. How long ago was that?
It was a while ago, and the funny thing is I actually had a sponsor who then messaged me because I was wearing like their jerseys and stuff, and they messaged me and accused me of like partying all night, and like that's why I didn't make it to day 2. And I was like, I played until like 10 o'clock at night, and then I went to sleep. Like
I'm just old.
It's the old trust me, I'm responsible.
I think what had happened is I was just walking around the hall, and I'm like, out of shape, and I never leave my computer, so I just fucked up my foot, man.
Wait, Magic players leave their computer? Actually, you don't. Do you have an experience, Airball, of like getting somewhere late or like missing a round one, having round one loss or something?
No, I am pathologically afraid of being late to anything. I do
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, you're a blue light control player.
If you want like a childhood airball story, like my whatever the anti-villain origin story is, I remember like being the goalie for my soccer team when I was in school, and my parents were like chronically late for things. And one day they got me to a game, but like half an hour late. My coach is just there looking daggers at me like it's my fault, like it was my fault, like we didn't leave early, like I could drive myself. And I think that has stuck with me up until now. So I am almost never late for anything.
I was in a Pokemon tournament. I've played a lot of games. I went from Yu-Gi-Oh to Pokemon, back to Yu-Gi-Oh to Magic, back to Yu-Gi-Oh, back to Magic. But for like, I don't know, like a year or two, year and a half, I was a competitive Pokemon player. And I remember I went to Internationals, biggest tournament of the year, in like Columbus, Ohio or something. And I get to round one, and right before round one, you look at your phone and it tells you what table. And it shows that I'm on table 50. So I'm like, cool. I go to table 50, I'm there early. And like 20 minutes through me actually playing my match against my opponent, I'm approached by one of the judges that says that I'm at the wrong table 50. Apparently, there's two different sides of the venue that both have table 50s. And
were you on like 50 Boulevard and you were supposed to be at 50 Street?
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. It was like 50 blue and I was supposed to be at 50 red. But I didn't know that it was color coordinated. They probably should have had like 1 to 50 and then 51 to 100 instead of 1 to 50 and then 1 to 50 again. Anyways, regardless, I got transported to my correct table and started playing against that person. Ended up losing because I got the game loss. So, moral of the story: know how you're going to get there. Give yourself ample time to get to your seat, get to the venue, get your deck set up, and be comfortable. Research other decks and plan a sideboard against them. That's one thing that I see a lot out of my regional championship qualifiers. People bring sheets of paper all folded up, and I swear it's like in calligraphy and stuff, laminated, all of their sideboard plans against other decks. And I guess
those are just Phyrexian cards.
Yeah, just all Phyrexian cards. I don't know how much it happens in limited. Like maybe I know there's different archetypes that you can draft in limited, and you want to be able to have a game plan against like the other colors. But how do you research and plan against other limited decks if you're in like a limited tournament?
Play. You have to practice. Get some hands-on experience or watch content creators and see their drafts. And people are getting spoiled now with best of one on Arena, so we don't really sideboard anymore. So people are going to be very out of practice. But yeah, there's no sideboard guides.
I don't know, Airball. I know. Have you made us like a paper sideboard guide, like printed, maybe not laminated, but have you made one before?
I haven't. I've built sideboard guides ahead of time, but I've never actually brought them into a match. I didn't even know it was legal until earlier today, honestly.
Yeah, there's people just in between sideboarding, just like unfold their 20 folds of their paper, like ruffling it around, and looking at it and doing their sideboard just off the piece of paper. I did that only one time in my entire life. Made a sideboard guide on a piece of paper, and I ended up making third place in the entire like 2,000 person tournament. So one person sample size, one time. I get it works. You can do that. You can bring it to tournaments, but even if you don't actually physically bring it to the tournament, just like know what your plan is against other decks. Research, do your due diligence ahead of time. You can print it off or you cannot. We already talked this a little bit before, but you can set up a card pool with somebody. Make sure you get there on time before the tournament starts. But set up a card pool with somebody. Make it a good time, and try not to stress yourself out too much. Have you had any times where you're just like super anxious before a tournament?
Constantly. Like I'm never not anxious before a tournament. Even like an F&M will get me a little anxious, honestly.
Usually not. Except for like the Mythic Invitational. That was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I think if you're with your friends and you're together all, and you're maybe at an Airbnb or hotel with them instead of just going by yourself, it, at least for me, has alleviated a lot of the stress from starting the tournament. Because you're all talking together. Round one goes up and you're ready to start, and you all say good luck to each other. It's just a good vibe. And that goes into what we're going to talk about the next is the day of the tournament. And, bring a friend. It's going to be a long day. Show up early, register, pack water, pack snacks. Michael, which isn't here on the podcast today, but he'll usually stock like a cooler full of like Red Bulls, waters, Gatorades. He'll put maybe some coconut water in there. But I don't personally pack a lunchbox or anything. I just go with my friends to like a McDonald's or something if we're in the middle of a round or we finish early. How do you do your food routine? I'll start with Nerd Girl and then go to Airball after.
I like to make sure I bring waters because I don't want to spend $5 plus on a bottle of water at the convention. So what ends up happening is I just don't drink, and then I get really dehydrated. And then by the time I get home on Monday, my like lips are all chapped and I feel miserable. And I do tend to try to bring a snack. So it's like 2 bottles of water and a giant crumble cookie or a Cliff Bar or something like that. So not a whole lunch, but I do like to make sure that I have access to stay hydrated and some emergency food if my stomach's growling in between rounds and I don't have enough time to go get something like a McDonald's like you. Usually my friends, whoever scrubs out of like the midday round, or like gets their butt whooped or kicks somebody's butt very quickly, that person will go on a quick food run and grab something that's close.
See, that's what I meant. I would just lose super fast. And like, there's a KFC across the street.
Yeah.
And just do a food run for everybody. I've been in both situations. I've been the person that gets all the food because I won very quickly and also because I lost very quickly. And also I've just been the recipient of someone else happening and just bringing the food to us. It's always a good time.
Yeah, if you have a decent enough group, like 4 or 5 people, usually someone like 1-3 drops, and then that person can just like kind of be the food go-getter, which selfishly I very much appreciate.
So we had to bring Airball with us.
No joke, that has happened before.
Yeah, I think during Vegas, I was like, during the last Vegas, I was like, Airball, please, coffee, for the love of God.
Yeah, but we all scrubbed out relative to you. You day 2'd that event. Everyone else was just like, well, shit, what do we do?
Yeah, and the D-Gen event was that night, which I stayed out and hung out with everybody at Topgolf, and then went and played day 2.
That's the one I was at, right? The one where you made day 2 and you had a pretty deep run?
Mm-hmm.
How were your lips? Were they chapped afterwards, or did you do a good job hydrating?
No, they were good. I learned. I've been playing competitive Magic for a while. I've started the water bottle thing a long time ago.
Actually, now that I remember, they had a stand that would basically only had pretzels and drinks and no other food. I think like almost right next to that. And I drank too many monsters that day. But I also, oh my gosh, really, really dumb story. I was going to enter the main event that was modern with my awesome Niv Mizzet Reborn deck. And I signed up for the tournament. It said modern and everything on my phone, clicked sign up, paid for it and everything. And then I get to the tournament. Oh, please don't do this if you're listening to this. I get to the tournament and I look at the big list just to make sure my name's on there, which you should probably do right before the tournament starts. Make sure your name's on the list of players to play. And I realized that my name wasn't on the list. And I was like, oh, that's fine. People make mistakes. I'm just going to go to the front and get it figured out. I'm going to be able to play, right? And they're like, no, you're not on the list. And I'm like, wait, what? They said, yeah, you're on the other modern list. I accidentally signed up for a side event on the next day instead of signing up for the modern main event, and still paid for it. And so I couldn't enter the main event that same day that Nerd Girl's talking about. And I ended up having to play in that modern event the next day. And I had a commander game with Gavin Verhey and Veggie Wagon and other people like planned for like a couple hours after. So I ended up only playing one round of this tournament that I paid for anyway, and then went to go play commander with Gavin. So I guess it worked out. But more of the story,
nice.
Know what you're signing up for and do that. Make sure your name's on the list.
Was that the EDH game with Yoshi?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so quick. Sorry, I'm going to do it. I got to do the thing.
Don't do it. Okay, do it.
Yoshi bid on Gavin for a charity Extra Life event and got a date with Gavin, and that's how she got Gavin to play in that game with you guys, right? That was their date that she won for the charity auction.
I did not know that that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
What a cool opportunity. I hope there's an opportunity to do it again.
So I don't know if you guys know this, but DJ's doing another charity auction starting on the 14th of next month.
You had to do it. No,
I had to. It's for a good cause. DGen Gaming is going to raise $50,000 for Extra Life, and you guys could get Gavin Verhey to go play in a game of Magic with you. Just saying, he's already agreed.
Go follow team DGen Gaming, Degenerate Gaming on Twitter. to look at all the details. Whisper, whisper, wink, wink. You should do that.
Okay, good. You're not cut.
No, we're not cutting that out. It's staying in. it's staying in after the edits. Let's go ahead and go towards the actual gameplay. Okay, you got there early. You got there on time. You have your water bottle, like Nerd Girl said. You had a Red Bull. You have a Gatorade. You have a big crumble cookie. You're set up. You came with your friends. They're playing in their match already. Now you're in the game. What do you do now? We have a list of things that you should probably keep in mind. Show up promptly to your seat. That should be a given. Don't get there later. You'll get a game loss. If you don't mind, Nerd Girl, do you have you memorized the minutes of time it takes for you to get to your seat before you get a game loss and a match loss?
It's 3 minutes for a game loss, 10 minutes for a match loss.
Yep.
And one other thing I would recommend about getting to your seat early, one good benefit to that is actually you get to choose which side of the table you sit on if you show up first. And sitting at the table on the side that looks at the clock can be quite important, especially when you play dumb control decks like Airball. It helps you keep an eye on the time and be mindful of what you have to make sure you're not getting gameplay penalties or just drawing unintentional draws too many times.
All right, now Airball, you get to retaliate.
I don't play dumb control decks. I play smart control decks.
Play smart control decks.
I play the biggest brain control decks, the most wrinkles. My decks transcend time.
Oh my gosh, is that just because you play Teferi? You can't say that. Oh my gosh, it's probably because you play Teferi. Anyways, you do want to show up to your seat. You don't want to get that game loss. You don't want to get a match loss. And what Nerd Girl said, probably the most important thing is being able to get into a seat that looks at the clock. That's just so important. Number two, enjoy yourself. Take only what you need with you. Yeah, you can take your backpack. Oh, I always wrap my backpack, one of the arms of the backpack, around my leg, because there's a lot of times where someone can swipe your backpack from behind you if you're not watching closely enough, if you're in the middle of a match, and you don't want to get your stuff stolen, definitely. So I always wrap it around my leg.
That's a very, very good thing. You can wrap it around the leg, or you can actually put the foot of your chair in one of them. And oftentimes what I do, I'm a little bit more fortunate in that way, is I can actually just put it on the back of the chair, not hanging on the back, but behind me in my seat. And then I just kind of sit on the edge of the seat. But there is a lot of thieves that will run around and just pick up bags as they walk by. That's actually very common.
Yeah, and this is about more than just traveling light and showing up to your seat light, right? If you have cards for other formats or from other decks in your deck box, and your deck box gets taken away for a deck check, you can get a game loss penalty for having an invalid deck, or an invalid sideboard, technically.
Yeah,
that's actually really important if you have one of those deck boxes that have multiple deck holders. You don't want to have your Pioneer deck in there with your Modern deck or something, because a lot of those cards are cross-compatible and they will give you some grief.
Yeah, you'll need a really, really nice judge to not get a game loss if you have cards of other formats in a different deck, but still in the same deck box when you're getting a deck check. It's just anxiety-inducing. So I just carry the least possible, only the relevant tokens that I need, and my exact sideboard and my exact main deck in that deck box, and nothing else. And then I actually go ahead.
Quick story. I almost got a game loss against Ben Stark for a very similar thing. I was in day 2 of a Grand Prix, and a friend was like, "Hey, I have to leave. We all scrubbed out and we're driving home. I have a gift for you." And he gives me a card in a sleeve, face down, so you can only see the magic back. I'm sitting down. I'm already shuffled up. I'm ready to play. I'm playing against Ben S. So I was like, okay, great. I take it and I throw it in my deck box and shuffle up and present. Immediately get a deck check. And I'm like, wait a minute, what was that card? And the judges have already taken my box and they've already walked off. And I come back and the judges come back and they're just like, so you have a deck, or you have a card in your deck that's legal in the format that's not in your deck list. This is a problem. And so I was just like, oh no.
Oh, wow.
And what had happened was I was 8-0 in day 1 and then ended up going 8-1 because I died to a card that I shouldn't have. I misread how it worked. And so I let them kill me with this card. So my friend got me a copy of the card and signed it and doodled on it and stuff and then gave it to me. So thankfully, Ben S backed me up. He's like, yeah, her friend just walked by and gave that to her. And they were like, oh, it's actually even in from a different a reprint. So it was like an older version of the card. And they were like, okay, you're probably not that stupid to cheat. So we'll give you a pass. But I think if Ben would have been like, yeah, I don't know, I think they probably would have gave me a game loss.
Wow. Any situation like that happened to you, Airball, where you had something else in your deck and someone else came over for a deck check or anything?
No, not in paper. It did happen to me in an online tournament. Back when CFB was running their tournaments not with Melee. Their system was really just ass, right? So I uploaded a deck list once, and then I tweaked it the day before and uploaded it and added like an extra copy of Disdainful Stroke and took something else out of the sideboard. And then I showed up the next day, won a game one, went to game two, and cast a Disdainful Stroke that, broke the opponent's back. And I'm thinking, great, easy 2-0 onto the rest of the tournament. And then I get a message from the judge off screen. He's like, did you just cast a Disdainful Stroke? And I said, yes. And he's like, well, it's not in your deck list. Well, it turns out on the CFB website, in order to update your deck, it required like this arcane series of clicks that I just didn't go all the way through. I guess I didn't click submit at the very last stage. So I ended up playing a card that I shouldn't have and getting a game loss and ultimately losing the match because of it. Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's what can happen if you're not like really prepared, or if you have other things that you should not have. I get that weird anxiety every time the judge comes over and is hovering over, because right before they give you a deck check, they kind of like stand behind you in like a very ominous way. It's like,
nothing to see here.
It's like, that's a deck check coming. So every time that happens, I'm like, okay, quick, before they actually come over here, let me check my deck and make sure I'm unsideboarded from the last match before. Make sure there's no extra cards in there, because that's like your last time to take your cards out, right? When you see the judges walking over, looming, hovering, and before you can get out of there unscathed with the game loss. Anyways, let's go ahead and go over the next one. Verify that you have the correct opponent. You don't want to have the wrong opponent, like you were with me in the Pokemon tournament. Just have the right opponent. You won't get game losses. Shuffle your deck, present it to your opponent. Present companions before presenting your deck, only if it's format relevant, especially in Pioneer, where there is Yorion still legal, and there is Gigantha and different companions that you can be playing with. If you don't reveal it before you play and shuffle your deck and present your deck, you cannot play with it in the game. It has to stay on your sideboard, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So you just want to make sure that you do everything that you need to do before the match starts. Decide who goes first. Most people do like a high roll. Some people do odd and even. Some people do low roll and try to do like a middle roll or whatever. Most people just do high roll. Odd even is like a little bit rarer for someone to ask if you want to do odd and evens or flip a coin or something. But odd and even actually, in my opinion, I think is better. It's like less variance, because
it's not a matter of variance, right? It's just you can't have a tie.
Right. Well, I guess that's what I meant by saying less variance. You can't have like the variable of tying. Because when you do high roll and you roll 2 dice and both of you roll a 12, both of you roll 7 or whatever, you have to roll again, and it's just like something that you don't really have to do unless you just say, oh, odd or even, they call odd, you roll a 6. Okay, now you get to pick whether you want to go first or second. Go ahead, Nifro.
I hate it.
You don't like what do you not like?
I don't like odd or even.
Why not?
I have a semi-superstitious thing about Magic gameplay, and that's that I like to keep everything the same every time. Now, it's not a superstition in so much as that I think it brings me luck, and it's not really a thing where it's like, I think I'm due. I just like knowing that I didn't have a lot of control. If I do it the same way every time, then I didn't really have control over things going poorly, if that makes sense. So here's a good example of this for a GP, for limited. You get to your seats, right, to build your deck, and you can sit down on either side of the table. I like to get there late, so that way I don't have a choice. My opponent got there first. They sit down at whatever side they want, and then I get my deck, my pool, right? If I got there first and I sat on the other side of the table and they open up the crazy bombs, I'm just like, man, I could have sat there. But if I just get there late every time, I never had the chance, so it doesn't matter. But now I roll all day and I lose the die roll, and then I sit down with you and you say odd or even, and I'm like, okay, great. So that then I lose that one. I'm just like, damn, if it was high roll, maybe I would have gotten it this time.
Wait, that's just not how it works, right? That's just not it. That's not how it works.
But if you keep it the same every time, then it doesn't matter.
But it never matters though, right?
but you keep it the same. That's what I don't want to control it. So like if I have any say, because they'll say, is odd or even okay? So if I say yes,
You just
I
say
have control over
okay.
it.
If someone asks you that, you literally say no. You
No, I say
high
yes
roll?
because I'm too much of a wimp to say no to somebody.
Well, these are the pro strats for playing against Nerd Girl. If you're ever there on day 2 of a limited GP and you see her sit across the table from you, know that you should ask for odd or even.
That way you're just tilted on the spot.
This is value.
That's high value. You always lose odd or evens?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always lose whatever. If I have control over it, I lose. It's fine.
You just want to have no control. I guess you can put all of your control that you do have in your gameplay.
Yeah.
When you're not in gameplay, you're like, I don't want to think about it. It's too much brain power. Oh, interesting. Did you do high roll airball?
I do high roll. I know odd or even is better, but it's just a habit.
I think I just do high roll because I believe that odd or even is better. Okay, just inherently. Okay, but here's why I do high roll, because sometimes you say odd or even and someone has a massive problem with it, right? They're like, no, high roll,
like me.
but they'll actually say no, I only do high roll. High roll 2 dice, that's it. And you're like, well, I mean, odd or even is like you can't tie, and they're like high roll.
I think I like high roll. I think for psychological reasons, I like that high roll is already a competition before the game in a way that odd or even just doesn't feel like it is. Like we're competing to see who gets the higher roll on the dice. It feels like the game has already started.
But it is still exactly a competition, though. You're competing on who can get the odd or even correct.
Yeah, but like competing over the parity bit in the number is not nearly as intuitive as competing over the higher number.
Now, to be fair, I don't actually care which we do. I just always want to do the same one. So whatever is the general consensus of how you do it, that is what I want to do. So I don't actually care if it's high roll or odd or even. I just always want it to be the same.
Yeah, you want to go with the flow. But I think you should still do odd or even. Anyways, let's move on. You play methodically and efficiently. You have 50 minutes to play a best of 3 match. You don't have a chess clock, unlike in Arena. If you're coming from Arena and you're expecting to have a chess clock, just like it says in Arena, in a competitive REL event in paper, it's not going to happen. Your opponent playing blue light control airball is probably going to take like 40 minutes per turn, and you only have like 3 minutes to decide your place. I'm exaggerating, but sometimes your opponents will take longer than others, and you'll have to play faster based on that if your opponent's playing slower, because you both have the same time clock. Have you run into a situation? I mean, I guess I can talk to Airball before MTG Nerd Girl, because you probably run into situations, right, where the time's going down and you're sweating.
I used to constantly draw, like unintentionally draw when I played Paper Magic to begin with, and it sucked because I was usually in like a dominant board state and I just didn't have enough time to finish, and the opponent didn't scoop like a jerk. And so I've learned that I need to like actually put the motor on when I'm in a completely winning position and actually end the game quickly, when that's the last thing I want to do. Being in a winning position is fun. I don't want the game to end.
Yeah, you want to draw more cards. Oh my gosh, Nerd Girl had this biggest eye roll for those of you not watching on YouTube. Okay, if you're listening to this on a podcast, go to the Nuts and Bolts podcast on YouTube and just watch that eye roll.
Make
just
a GIF
the grossest statement. I'm winning and I don't want the game to end. I want them to suffer. Now, I will say, for players like Airball, competitive REL, a judge event, whatever, I'll call a judge. Get him on slow play. Like, don't let him draw you because he's in the tank for every freaking play. No joke. The first time I saw Airball play a match of Magic, I would have called judge on him 3 times for those stupid expressive iterations. They were so slow.
Did you take a long time, Airball, on your expressive iteration? Be honest.
It's a matter of perspective and opinion, and I don't really think we should be pointing fingers. I think that how you cast your expressive iteration is a very personal experience, and we shouldn't judge other people for how they express themselves that way.
It is an expressive iteration.
It is, yeah.
So you methodically look at the first card and you're like, okay, could get better. We have 2 more shots at this. Look at the next card, you're like, all right, 1 more card left. And you look at the last card and you're like, wait a second.
I will say that she probably had a point when I pulled out the Ouija board to try to figure out what card I should pick. That I think was a bit much, but I've gotten better.
Did you like high roll with them to see which card you were going to pick?
Take. It's like, when people play like 3-card poker and they squeeze them out really slow.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, actually, that's funny. We should talk about poker sometime, but not here. I just recently got into poker, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's like you look at the first card, second card, third card. You're like, okay, we have 3 options here. There's like 9 possibilities that could happen. Which one do I do first? I want this card in my hand, or do you pick the card in your hand first, or the card in exile first?
You have 3 factorial, right? Like you have the 3 different permutations because you need to choose which one goes into hand, which one goes into the bottom of the deck, and which one goes into exile. Those are 3 distinct decisions.
Right.
I think you make the decision for what's in exile first because that's the thing you can play that turn, and I think that's the easiest decision to make.
I mean, is it the easiest decision, Airball?
There are no easy decisions.
And this is why we're here until time, and that's why I'm going to put a judge over your shoulder if we ever play against each other.
It might take him over a minute to resolve expressive iteration, but overall, you don't want to do that. You want to maintain a good pace of play to where you don't run out your 50 minutes and have to go into time and play out your 5 turns of time and potentially either draw or lose a match that you could have otherwise won. You're responsible for your own and only your own triggers. This is a little bit of a hazy situation sometimes where there's triggers that technically happen, but your opponent can just let them go and it still happens, like prowess. There's also there's a ruling in Magic that and it works. It's this ruling with prowess, where if you have a prowess creature on board, say it's a Soulscar Mage, and you cast, lightning strike on something else, you don't actually have to declare that your prowess trigger happened until it would become relevant, since it's not a physical counter or a physical notation on the card or board state or life total. To where if you attack your 2/3 now, since it's prowess +1/+1 into your opponent's 2/2, they think they're going to block your 1/2 Soulscar Mage, but you didn't tell them that you had the trigger of prowess. So then after damage goes through, you're like, okay, now that it's relevant, my Soulscar Mage is a 2/3 and it destroys your 2/2. You want to make sure that you know things, that even if your opponent is working the rules that way,
Yeah, the Magic rules are very they give the player a lot of benefit of the doubt when it comes to missing triggers. A trigger is not considered missed until an action happens that material affects the board state that did not take into account the trigger. So if you cast like Craterhoof Behemoth or something, and the squad gets a buff and gets trample, then it doesn't. The trigger's not missed until you go to combat, go to damage, and then forget that the buffs were there.
In any situation where like your opponent had a missed trigger, Nerd Girl, or maybe like you did, and you're like, well, I guess I missed it, or do you any situation like? I mean, you've probably had a missed trigger situation before, right?
I mean, all the time.
I thought you were about to say never, and I was gonna have to disagree with you.
No, I miss things all the time, and I don't really have any good stories about them. I will say that like you can get in trouble for ankle shooting if you do something that intentionally tries to get your opponent to miss something. So if you are like hiding the prowess in some way, if the judge thinks you are in some way sort of trying to be misleading in their triggers or on your own, then that can be a problem. There was a situation where one of the pros kept letting their opponent miss a trigger and then kept calling a judge to get them in trouble for missing their triggers and not maintaining the board state. And they were actively looking for them to miss those triggers to win the game that way. And so the judge disqualified them from the whole tournament. It's not quite the same thing, but there is it is up to both players to maintain board state. If there's a non-May trigger and you let your opponent miss it, oftentimes you can get in trouble for it. They've become a lot more lenient on it than they used to be, but it's possible.
Yeah, I actually had a situation happen where I was in top 8 of an RCQ in a Rakdos mid-range mirror match, and I had a Kalitas on board that the replacement, it's a continuous replacement effect to have the creature get exiled and to make the 2/2 zombie when the creature gets exiled. If the creature gets exiled, what happened in that specific instance was something happened where the creature was supposed to die and it just like went to the graveyard. And I just missed the fact that it should have been exiled. And then we were like, and it went back to my turn and I drew a card. And we were like, okay, well, what happens? And my opponent called the judge. And
yeah, that's a special case. You can't miss a trigger that involves a card changing zone.
Right. So my opponent, I was like, well, maybe the card gets exiled, but you still don't get to make your 2/2. But the judge actually ruled it in my favor, saying that since it's in the same sentence and that it's a continuous replacement effect, it has to happen, and all of that effect has to happen. So the part where it exiles and makes the 2/2 had to happen. So I actually got my 2/2, and then the creature got exiled. But that's a little bit of a niche situation. But the moral of the story is you're responsible for your own triggers. You're not necessarily responsible for your opponent's triggers, but you're both, like Nerdgirl said, responsible for both maintaining a correct game state, if you will, right?
Yeah, you're not obligated, by the way, just to clarify what Nerdgirl was saying earlier, you're not obligated to point out when your opponent misses a beneficial trigger for them. So, like, if the opponent's Ledger Shredder connives and they just forget to, then you don't have to point that out to them. That happened to me playing against Arclight Phoenix an awful lot at the Puget Sound tournament. The guy missed like 5 connive triggers, and it probably cost him the game, and I just never pointed it out to him.
Yeah, and that's actually a situation we haven't covered yet, where it might be not where it's beneficial for your opponent to miss it. That's where you have to call them out on it and either call a judge or say that you missed that. I know there's a lot of things like, let's say like a Rotting Regisaur, right? That at the beginning of your upkeep, discard a card. That's a very big drawback. And your opponent goes to their turn and just immediately goes to combat and attacks and just doesn't discard the card. It's not like, oops, I missed the trigger, right? They actually like have to discard the card, and they could be maliciously doing that in order to gain an advantage. And at that point, you can call a judge and have that happen. But anyways, anything else that gets missed that wasn't a trigger, you can stop the game. You can call a judge. If you think that a judge is ruling something a little bit hazy, you can always appeal. It's not as common as in Magic as I've seen as it is in Yu-Gi-Oh, but in general, if you still think after you get a judge ruling and it's not the head judge, you should probably appeal. Any situations for you two that you've had to appeal? High roll.
The odds are evens. I was it didn't happen to me, but there was a case recently where there was a Modern player, and he was playing Tron versus Burn, and he had a Wormcoil Engine in play, and the opponent attacked into it, and just as a desperation move when the Wormcoil Engine blocked, he cast Deflecting Palm and tried to redirect the damage from the Wormcoil Agent back at their face, which is not how the card Deflecting Palm works, and anyone who reads the card for 5 seconds knows that that's not how the card should work. But they called a judge. The Tron player called a judge, and the judge came over and agreed with the Burn player, and then they just scooped up their cards and moved on, while spectators went over and said, no, that's completely the wrong ruling, go get the head judge. Head judge comes over and says, hey, obviously that's the wrong ruling, but you conceded when you scooped up your cards and walked off, and now we can't reestablish the board state, so I guess you lose. It was a pretty controversial thing. It was all over Twitter a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I remember that. It was very, very bad. It actually goes hand in hand with the fact that a lot of these like RCQ tournaments and stuff like that, they're no longer required to have an official judge. And the person who was the judge who made the ruling was just like a store employee with no judge qualifications whatsoever. So that's sort of the uproar, is that a lot of competitive REL events don't have judges, and they will make bad mistakes like that.
Yeah, for the most part, I've been in situations where like there's a store worker that's being a judge, but for the most part, there's someone in the store that like really knows the ruling. But if that's the actual judge that is appointed, and they're the head judge, you have to do what they say. I mean, even if they're wrong, you have to do what they say. I've heard about head judge situations where they've given the wrong ruling, but the player has to go with it. And then the last thing is the judges are your friends. They're not there to intimidate you. They just want to make sure the game is fluid and the game is going how it's supposed to go. And they're ambassadors of Magic. They're there to make Magic a better place. They're to make tournaments a better place. So judges are your friends. They're not your enemies. Even if I already said that I get anxiety when they walk behind me and they loom over me with a deck check. But that's just because a lot of bad things can happen when you get a deck check. There's a lot of things that we've already went over that can happen. That's why you want to make sure that you're on top of it. And whether it's to judges or to other players, you just want to make sure that you're just like, I guess this is like the number one rule, right? Like, just don't be a dick, right? Like, expect to deal with them, they'll happen every once in a while. Someone's going to try to angle shoot you. Someone's going to try to make it seem like your triggers aren't going to work out when you know your triggers are there. Someone's going to try to tell you you can't do that when you know you can. These things are going to happen in competitive REL tournaments, in Magic, and in a lot of other card games. But you know, any situations that you've had with just your opponents that are just being pretty scummy?
I mean, not just scummy, but there's also the people who like real life emote you. Like that's a real thing. They're just like, "Is it my turn yet? Is it my turn yet?" And then their turns take forever. There are people who do that. I definitely got super tilted against one of my very first Grand Prix that happened to me. I was playing for top 8 and they got to me with my first event, and I didn't know what to do when they were being kind of a jerk, and it was very stressful. And yeah, they really do exist.
I actually had someone emote me yesterday on Arena, and if that was a real life person, oh, I would have been upset. I ended up taking the high road and emoting them back, and as I was winning the game, stalled out the game a little bit. But that's not taking the high road. Don't do that. But I did that. But these people exist, and they want to get under your skin, but just don't let them get under your skin. And if you're not a dick back to them, hopefully it teaches them a lesson to not be a dick in the future. But you know, don't make other people feel uncomfortable. Don't be a dick. Don't, you know, try to purposely manipulate game states and things like that. Just don't do that. Just you're there to have fun. You're there to have fun in a tournament, and maybe you do good, maybe you don't, maybe you get unlucky, maybe you run super hot like the sun and you win a lot. You know, just don't bring negative energy to a Magic tournament, right? Let's see. Next up is in between your rounds. Find your headspace, ground yourself. The tournament days are long, and we'll talk a little bit about tilt here. Like if you just lost and you're in between a match and you go over to your friends and you're like, "Oh my gosh, you won't believe what happened. You will not believe what happened. I had a Teferi Hero of Dominaria on board, and my opponent had a Narset. I could not draw cards. I had a sweeper. My opponent countered it. How can my opponent counter my sweeper?" You know, there's like different things that could happen in Magic games, and you want to make sure that you are not like over tilting off the face of the earth, and that you go to your next match with a clear headspace.
I mean, that definitely makes sense. That's true for poker and everything else as well. Sometimes telling your bad beat story to your friends, if they're good friends and willing to hear it, that actually kind of helps. Having someone sort of to commiserate with you, if that's what helps, then great. If you need to not think about it and move on, that's true. But yeah, being tilted is never a good thing.
Any situation happen with you, Airball?
Oh, I'm very bad about this. I'll tilt off like for most of the day if I have a bad game, or like, and it's not like I don't usually tell bad beat stories. I usually tell the opposite. I think like I usually torment myself thinking, how could I have played around what they did? Oh, if I had done this 6 turns earlier, it would have been differently, and I should have seen that coming. And I'm such an idiot for not thinking about it, and I'll just spiral thinking about that for the rest of the day. And I know it makes me unpleasant to be around when that happens, and I'm trying to work on it, but honestly, I don't have the answers for that. I'm just working on it.
That's why if I didn't bring you into the conversation right now, you would just like slid right past this topic. You don't want to talk about it. Well, I mean,
yeah, no, I mean, you guys have both been around me when I've lost some shit. It's the most fun thing in the world.
I mean, talk about the good things then. Like when you go to your friends when like you just won the match, like that's when you're more talkative, I guess. Like I guess talk about
that. Yeah, I mean, there's for me, I think I take it probably a little too seriously. If I win, I feel like I'm on top of the world, and I tell everyone about it, and I played so well, and I did all this right, X, Y, and Z, and look at me. And I will still point out the things I did wrong as well. I'll be like, yeah, I fucked this up, and I fucked this up, and I fucked this up, but it didn't matter. I win. Everything's great and sunshine and daisies.
Like, wow, I had such an amazing play, totally outplayed them. They were so far ahead in the game, and I came back. You wouldn't believe it, but I also messed up in the home pot. But it didn't matter because I am the best player.
How did they get so far ahead in the first place?
They shouldn't have even been in that spot anyways. But I got out of it.
Right.
Look how smart I am. No, but when you're in between the matches, I usually try to, if I don't already have a drink, go get a drink. Go to make sure I always go to the restroom, and just get ready for the next match. Usually it's just like chilling out, talking to my friends. Tournament days are super long. I mean, as Nerd Girl said already, like lips get chapped, man. Lips get chapped. Hydrate, use the restroom, socialize, be with your friends, ask them how their matches went. Like if you just lost, something that really helps me if I just lost is to go over to someone that one of my friends that like won. So I can just like let them talk to me about how they won, and it kind of like makes me feel better and get ready for the next match. You want to like use the time wisely, get ready for your next matches. Like don't dwell on your losses, airball, and dwell on your mistakes. But over time, I think you will start to learn, especially if you play the same deck for a while, like what your mistakes are, and you'll just go get them in the next tournament. You know, how many times do you have like a couple tournaments lined up where you're like, or maybe it's even a local at your local game store on Friday night, where you're just like, okay, I know that I made that mistake. It sucks, but I'm just gonna not do that next week.
Yeah, I make a lot of mistakes, certainly, and I'm not too hard on myself for most of them, especially if it's like an issue where I didn't know exactly how the card worked, or I didn't know it also did this other thing, which happens a lot, especially as a limited player, because you're like, oh, that's not relevant for limited. So then in my head, the card no longer does that. So then when I play it in constructed, I only think of it in terms of what it does for limited. And the best example I have of that was the Black Saga, that opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker from the first Dominaria.
The Eldest Reborn.
So in limited, it doesn't make them sack planeswalkers because they just don't exist. That interaction is not a thing that has really come up in dozens, the hundreds of drafts of regular Dominaria that I've done. So I'm playing a constructed event and it's in there. And my Twitch chat's like, why didn't you make them sack the Teferi? And I'm like, what are you talking about? This doesn't do that. And I'm like, oh, yes, it does. Oops.
Yeah.
And so I'm not hard on myself for those. But if it's like, if I build a deck and I have a game plan, especially in limited, I'm like, this is what this deck does. I'm going to do this. I got to return this thing from the graveyard. And if I forget that it's in the graveyard and like, that was the whole point, I will get hard on myself for that.
Yeah, more of the story, like in between your matches, like sometimes, I mean, I guess if you're airball, your match will end in time, and then you'll be in time. You just finished your match, and all of a sudden, like you're the last match, and you just realize you're the last match, and then you'll say round 2 or whatever pairing it is are posted, or you'll see it on your phone or something, and you have to pack up your stuff super quick, and you have no time in between. That's kind of like sometimes that happens to me where I'm just like, dang, I really need to use the restroom, or I need to like go get a drink or go get like a hot dog or whatever because I'm starving. But the next round's literally starting right away. So make sure to even keep that in mind when you're in between matches, right?
So you can't go get a hot dog, but you can go to the restroom. So you just go to your next table and then you just flag down a judge and let them know you have to use the restroom, and they will give you a time extension. And I think that's super important because the likelihood that you will lose increases the more you have to pee. Like those two things go, like they're on the same line on the graph.
Just make a graph.
So yeah, just call a judge and be like, hey man, I went to time, I have to pee. And they're like, great. They will sit and watch your stuff. They will sit at your empty seat, let you leave your backpack there and let you run to the restroom. Judges are super nice like that. And I think that's actually some sort of like rule. They will not stop you from using the restroom.
I did not know that, actually. News to me. Look at that. We learn things every day. Any situation where you've had a situation come up where, you know, airball, where it's like at the end of time, the next round starts like right now and you're scrambling?
I don't know that I've ever had that not happen.
Oh my god.
Like, I am routinely like the last match playing. And it's not like my matches aren't even always going to time, right? It's just sometimes they end 40 minutes in and just everyone else was done in 10.
Fair. I mean, unless you're playing against
really
mono
50 to 60 minutes.
I mean, unless you're playing against mono red and lose. But you don't lose to mono red. You draw cards when you're supposed to win.
Who loses to mono red?
Oh,
hey, I play a lot of mono red and I've done just fine.
Wait, have you played against airball with mono red?
I'm sure.
Or just in general?
I remember getting raged at for casting like 3 absorbs in my top 15 against you.
Oh my gosh, did you rage?
I suppose I did.
I mean, absorb is for those of you who don't know that are listening, is the counter spell for double blue and a white that counters target spell and gain 3 life, and that almost wins the game instantly against mono red.
True.
It's like it basically counters the spell and also counters lightning bolt at the same time, so it's like 2 counter spells in one. But anyways, Michael, he says Michael goes to the car with the cooler to get some treats. So we talked about bringing a cooler with you, maybe with some snacks, some drinks, go get some stuff in between your matches, and come back. or maybe the person that already lost has come back with your McDonald's. Uh, let's talk about what you do after the tournament. If it was day one and you're going on to day two because you did really well, that's awesome. You should probably just eat real quick, take a shower, and go to bed immediately. The best thing you can do is get a lot of sleep, I think, before day two, so that you don't oversleep and miss out on your day two by your feet hurting.
Wait, I thought you were supposed to go to Topgolf.
Are you supposed to go to Topgolf?
Different.
Oh, different? Oh.
That's different. I stopped caring about competitive Magic. So now I just like, I day two to GP and I was just like, I don't really want to go. And I just like didn't go. And on the flight home, I sat down and was talking to the guy. He's like, oh, you were at the Magic tournament. I was like, yeah, I was playing. He's like, oh yeah, how'd you do? I was like, oh, I day two. And he's like, oh, how'd you do in day two? And I was like, oh, I didn't go. And he's like, wait, is your name Brittany? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I was the head judge and you were the only person not to show up to my day two. And I was like, oh.
I mean,
Yeah.
more than your story right now. I'm actually just surprised that you said your name.
I know it's public now. Wizards made me make it public, so now everybody knows it.
I know we don't necessarily like love it when people call you that.
No, I don't.
Like I remember, maybe it was like I think it maybe might have been after I was a DGen, and I'm surprised I'm still DGen after this. I knew your name. I don't know why. I don't know what it was from. It was from something. It might have been from like a random. I don't know if you're Brittany somewhere on Discord. I don't know what it is. Regardless, I knew your name somehow, and I went to your Twitch and I said like, "Hey, Brittany" or something like that, and then immediately got timed out, and I was like, "Wait."
Yeah, and I don't necessarily time people out like to punish them. I time them out just to remove the name because I don't want other people coming in. I have people come in and be like that they do not know me. They're just like, "Hey, Britt, how's it going?" And I'm just like,
Oh,
"Huh?" Like if I want, like I don't understand.
I mean, I guess not a lot of people know your name, Airball, right?
No, but that's just because I'm not very famous.
I mean, you're right next to Nerd Girl on my screen. You're just famous by proxy at this point.
Right, yeah.
Anyways, but
I'm not very famous, so don't count on me for that.
well, I mean,
Well, then why did we have you on?
Because you were desperate. That's why.
Well, then we're not famous. Famous people don't get desperate, right?
Yeah, famous people don't get desperate. They go with the flow, you know, kind of like you do with evens and odds. I'm gonna keep bringing it up. Anyways, if you didn't make day two, if you didn't make the bad joke, I know. If you didn't make day two, that's still fine. Especially even if it's your first time, you know, playing in a competitive REL tournament in paper, and you played arena, and you worked up the confidence to go to this, and you've done all the things that we've already talked about. You made sure you got there on time. You were with your friends. You had a good time, good vibes. You went through the tournament and didn't make day two. That's fine. I think there's a lot that can be said of, you know, holding your head up high when you do lose and not tilt off. I mean, I get super upset when I lose, but and making day two is a super big deal. If you did make day two, that's awesome. Get a lot of sleep. However unwinding does for you, go to sleep. Scroll through TikTok or whatever you do when you go to sleep, and then just do it again. The same thing you did for day one. Do in day two, and hopefully you make it. And make sure you catch your flight on the way back, or get home safe. And that's basically the end of the tournament experience. There's not much more to talk about. I mean, is there anything else that we didn't cover today that you might want somebody in a competitive REL that hasn't experienced it before to know outside of the stuff we've already covered?
Honestly, nothing. I think we were pretty thorough, and I don't really have enough experience to talk beyond what we've already talked about. So,
yeah, and
I got one.
Yeah,
I think it's really important that you guys keep track of your life totals with pen and paper. People with dice or people with a phone sort of tracker. Some of them have like a calculator history. That's kind of helpful. But so that would work. But also dice flip over very easily. And if there's any sort of like discrepancy in life totals, the judge will typically side with whoever has the physical copy. And the reason for that is because they have proof. Even if the proof doesn't line up, it's like, hey, I gained 2 life here, I lost 2 life here, this is what happened. And the other person can't really prove that their dice just didn't like flip over.
yeah.
So, or like, you know, turn one to the side. So always bring pen and paper. I think it's super important.
Oh, yeah, and I always bring plenty of dice too, especially if things have 1/1 counters and things like that. I think you don't want to be asking around, hey, you got a dice? Can I borrow your dice? I always like to bring plenty of dice to make sure that I don't have to borrow anyone else's. But anyways, thank you all so much for listening, especially those who made it this far. Make sure to give us a follow to see our next episode. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Nuts and Bolts Pod. And thank you so much, Nerd Girl, for coming out here, supporting the podcast, being on here last second. I know
No
it took
worries.
a lot of begging and pleading.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you once again for hanging out with us, and we'll see you in the top 8.